In life, there is a paradox that we often overlook. The most terrifying person in the room is not the loud one, not the one who bangs their fist on the table or screams at the top of their lungs. The truly dangerous one is the silent person, the one who has reached the limit of their endurance. They don't need to make noise. They don't need to act aggressively to create fear. Their silence is the strongest warning. When a person is silent, they are not weak, but someone who has endured enough pain and has learned to restrain themselves so that one day their true power will no longer be hidden. Carl Jung, the master of psychoanalysis, once said that within every person lies both light and darkness. This is a reality that no one can deny, especially for empaths, those deep souls that the world often misunderstands. People easily view them as weak individuals, overly sensitive and vulnerable. But in reality, they are the ones carrying an immense energy that cannot be dismissed. They live in the tension between two extremes, feeling deeply every emotion, every situation, yet maintaining an extraordinary calm. They see through every lie, every evil, but they still choose to believe in kindness, in the beauty of the world. So, what really happens when an empath, who has been misunderstood and undervalued, decides to no longer remain silent? What do they do when the inner storm has grown large enough to no longer be suppressed? Their story is one of rising, a process of inner transformation that Carl Jung described in detail in his studies. In today's video, we will explore the quiet rise of empaths, those who were once underestimated but later discovered their inner strength to step into the light and never return to the darkness that once held them back. Let's walk through each step of this transformation to understand that true power is not something to be flaunted outwardly, but is peace and freedom from within. As mentioned, empaths are often misunderstood as easy prey for manipulation due to their gentle appearance and deep sense of empathy. Because of their gentle demeanor and ability to feel deeply, they are often seen as easy targets. However, this is a misjudgment. Empaths are not simply people living in emotions. In fact, they have developed a sophisticated defense system early on to survive in this harsh world. They don't react immediately to manipulation or intrusion. Instead, they choose restraint and clarity to protect themselves. Their silence and composure are powerful weapons. They are acutely aware of every movement around them and will never let themselves be drawn into deceitful games. The world may not see it, but empaths always possess a refined and strong self-defense ability that not everyone recognizes. As Carl Jung said, the true self only appears when a person is pushed to their breaking point. For an empath, betrayal and harm are not temporary shocks, but powerful catalysts that push them to begin the awakening process. Betrayal, especially when it comes from those they love and trust the most, not only hurts, but also forces them to face the reality of who they are and the world around them. This is when the empath must realize that they can no longer live depending on others for validation or love. This awakening process does not happen immediately. Through these painful shocks, they begin to explore themselves, discover the deeper aspects of their ego, and realize the latent strength within them. The pain becomes the springboard for their journey toward individuation, a process that is not just about rediscovering themselves, but about developing and solidifying a strong and independent ego, no longer affected by betrayal or lack of trust from others. When empaths move beyond the stage of pain and awakening, their original self begins to rise. This is the moment when they no longer immerse themselves in the past and the wounds, but instead see them as valuable lessons for growth. What is particularly remarkable about empaths is that they do not accumulate resentment. Instead of holding on to negative emotions, they preserve memories like data with the goal of learning and improving themselves. Memories are not burdens, but steps on the journey of self-development. The more pain they experience, the sharper and stronger they become. And when a new self awakens, they are no longer easily persuaded to return to old choices or relationships that have lost their meaning. The original self is not about returning to the past, but about rising up, firmly asserting that they deserve to live an independent, free life, unburdened by past wounds. The concept of enantiodromia, which Jung described as a reversal, occurs when something reaches its extreme and then returns in the opposite direction. For the empath, this is the powerful transformation they go through. They were once the ones who endured, the ones willing to overlook everything to maintain peace and love. But when the awakening process is complete, they become determined and unshakable. They begin to realize that forgiveness is not about letting go or accepting everything, but a purposeful choice, an action that is cultivated over time. Empaths no longer forgive unconsciously. Instead, they forgive with clarity about their boundaries and demand respect. This change makes them no longer easily exploited and begins to build relationships based on equality, where respect and love are the prerequisites. Finally, after a challenging awakening and transformation, the empath no longer acts purely out of instinct. As Jung once said, the greatest triumph is to overcome the part within you that wants to pull you down. After facing the greatest trials, they have learned how to transcend natural reactions, negative emotions, and act with awareness. Empaths no longer need to respond to every provocation or harm with anger or pain. Instead, they have learned to respond with clarity and wisdom. They know when to step back and when to stand up, and more importantly, they know that inner peace is the greatest strength they possess. They do not need to prove their strength to anyone because they have found inner freedom and a peaceful life within themselves. They act from a place of wholeness and are no longer influenced by negative emotions or insecurity. When empaths reach the state of awakening, the first thing they realize is that they are no longer affected by those who once manipulated them in the past. Before, they might have always sought to please others, accepted unhealthy relationships just to maintain peace, but now they understand that true peace comes from inner freedom. They no longer need to react. They no longer need to chase acceptance from anyone or explain themselves. They know when to remain silent, when to walk away, and never feel guilty about it. They have realized that their presence is not something that can be taken away or wasted in relationships that do not deserve it. They can walk away from places that do not align with their values and themselves without feeling loss or lack. This inner freedom allows them to maintain peace in their soul as they no longer rely on the validation or acceptance of others to feel whole. With this inner freedom, the emotional intelligence of the empath begins to shine. Carl Jung once described empaths as emotional decryption devices capable of recognizing, observing, and deeply remembering every action that hurts them. However, the difference is that they do not let these negative emotions control them. Instead, they store these memories as necessary data to better understand themselves and the people around them, without allowing them to turn into resentment or hatred. The emotional intelligence of the empath helps them not only understand the actions of others, but also perceive the underlying motives behind those behaviors. They become keen observers, knowing when to protect themselves and when to continue trusting. This understanding helps them choose relationships wisely, build strong and sincere connections, while avoiding toxic or negative relationships. When their emotional intelligence becomes more developed, empaths no longer feel the need to be understood or accepted by others. They have come to understand themselves so well that they no longer feel the need to explain or argue. The awakening process has helped them realize that there is no need to please everyone or change themselves to fit the expectations of others. They no longer react emotionally or get caught up in unproductive arguments. Instead, they act based on a deep understanding of themselves and the values they have chosen to live by. They understand that inner peace comes from living authentically and not needing to justify or explain themselves to anyone. Empaths choose to act in harmony with the truth in their soul, rather than fearing judgment or rejection. Therefore, they begin to consciously choose relationships and situations, no longer getting caught up in unnecessary conflicts. After going through the awakening process, empaths change the way they reflect things from their surroundings. In the past, they may have reflected what others wanted to see in order to maintain harmony and be loved. But now, after experiencing pain and awakening, They no longer reflect what others expect. Instead, they become a mirror reflecting raw truths, including the pain that others have caused them. This is not an act of revenge or causing harm to others, but an expression of transparency and honesty. Empaths no longer pretend or hide their true emotions. They are willing to reflect truths that others may not want to face, because they know that the truth always holds value. This change makes them immune to manipulation. They no longer allow themselves to endure dishonesty or harm without responding with truth. An important sign in the awakening process of the empath is the return of parts of themselves that they once rejected. Previously, in order to be loved and accepted, empaths often had to suppress strong emotions, needs, and personal boundaries to fit the expectations of others. However, after awakening, they begin to reclaim the right to say no, the right to leave, and the right to protect themselves without feeling guilty. They no longer stop caring about others, but now their care becomes selective. They no longer give unconditional love and attention. Instead, they reserve it for those who truly deserve it, for healthy and worthwhile relationships. Empaths understand that in order to love others, they must first love themselves, and this includes setting clear boundaries and protecting themselves from unnecessary harm. The ultimate result of this awakening and self-development process is the achievement of emotional sovereignty, a state in which empaths no longer need love or recognition from others to feel complete. They no longer need to prove their worth, nor do they feel compelled to please others in order to be loved. This ultimate freedom comes from having enough fullness and inner peace. They understand that true freedom does not come from external acceptance, but from the ability to maintain peace and independence within the soul. Empaths are no longer dependent on the judgment of the outside world to determine their self-worth. They do not need love or recognition from others to feel whole. They have achieved the ultimate state of freedom and inner fullness, not influenced by external factors. Through each phase of transformation, from inner awakening to establishing emotional sovereignty, empaths not only find themselves again, but also become individuals capable of shaping their lives and relationships with awareness, self-control, and strength. Every wound in an empath's life, as Carl Jung wrote, each wound is where the light can enter. For them, pain is not the end, but the door that opens to awakening and transformation. They do not merely survive pain, but become a guiding light for those souls still trapped in the darkness. After experiencing pain, empaths do not only grow stronger, but also become beacons, lighting the way for those who are lost in life. Over time and maturity, empaths have learned to love selectively. They feel deeply but respond with clarity and understanding. They forgive, but no longer repeat past mistakes. Forgiveness, for them, is not a sign of weakness or surrender, but a deliberate choice, a way to free themselves from past entanglements. They know when to respond, when to remain silent, and when the time is right to act precisely, at the right moment, and with the right person. The true strength of an empath does not come from withdrawing or fleeing from challenges. Their strength comes from selective integration. They no longer pour their light into places that only drain it. They have learned to preserve their energy for themselves, no longer being the rescuer for those who do not wish to change. Instead, they know how to protect themselves and only offer their light to those who deserve it, relationships filled with love and respect. An awakened empath is not someone who destroys or rebels against the world. They do not need to fight or confront those who have hurt them. They do not need to retaliate, but they can no longer be manipulated. They become individuals who cannot be subdued, no longer controlled by anyone or anything except their own self. This is the essence of awakening, a natural phenomenon, when they have found inner freedom and solid independence. The final message for all empaths on their awakening journey. An awakened empath is no longer a sufferer. They are a symbol of light, wisdom, and inner freedom that cannot be controlled. They have overcome pain and become guides, not only for themselves, but also for those seeking truth and light in their lives. They do not live for themselves alone, but become an inspiration, helping others awaken and find their own inner strength. If you feel that the story of an empath's awakening journey has touched your heart, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to continue exploring profound topics about psychology, growth, and awakening with us. Share this video with your loved ones, as everyone deserves to find the light within themselves. Let us accompany you on this journey.